Take that away, thanks. Good morning, honored Toastmasters and guests. Monopoly was invented by a woman. Her name was Lizzie McGee, and she was born in 1866. Her father was a newspaper man and helped found the Republican Party. He traveled with Abraham Lincoln as Abraham Lincoln debated with Stephen Douglas. And Lizzie, we don't know that much about her, but what we know is that she was quite a woman. Early in her adulthood, she got a patent on a way to facilitate the movement of paper through a typewriter. She was also a playwright and a poet and a feminist and an inventor of games and an activist. One of my favorite things about her was she put an ad in the Chicago newspaper that described her as a white woman slave available for sale. And she got offers, which was somewhat disturbing, because really she was just trying to point out that it was very difficult for a woman single at that time to make enough money to live because they weren't paid as much as men were. Things have changed a bit. But what was the alternate? The alternative was to get married, love, honor, and obey a husband, and have the legal status of a chattel, which you would understand as a piece of personal property. And she was an activist. And one of the things that she became very interested in was the idea of a man named Henry George. Now, Henry George wrote a book called Poverty and Progress, and he lectured around the country. And his idea was what was defined or reduced to a single tax, because he lived in this age when the industrialists were becoming so powerfully wealthy that they could own all of the property. And when you own the property, you have a monopoly on the rents and you can charge what you want. And Lizzie took this idea and said, I can make a game. And she made a game called the Landlord's Game. And when she made it, it had a great sense of humor. And this game became popular. She sent it to a professor at one of the elite Eastern institutions who was also a fan of Henry George and the single tax idea. And the students started playing this game. Now, it was a game that just got copied by other people. So it took on various names. It was called Finance, it was called Easy Money, it was called Monopoly, a variety of names. Because if you wanted to play the game, you simply copied the game, made your own version. And in fact, you can imagine a bunch of white male Eastern students with type A personalities playing this game, where the sole purpose of the game was to drive everyone else into economic devastation. But it turned out that other people enjoyed it too. In fact, the modern game has these properties named for the streets in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And that was a result of a group of Quaker women that named those streets. And they named the streets based on the city. The poverty-stricken were named Baltic and Mediterranean, and then up that street, and then you got into the blue collars, and then to the professionals, and you ended up on the boardwalk, the most expensive property, where the very wealthy paraded up and down the boardwalk in carts being pushed by their servants. Now, game was invented shortly after the turn of the century, right after the Gilded Age. It became very popular, and eventually, enterprising man started making the games and selling them during the Depression. And eventually, he sold the game to Parker Brothers. Now, this created a problem later because he didn't own the game and he hadn't invented it. In fact, he'd played it at somebody's house. But the original game had 2 sets of rules. And Lizzie was kind of ingenious. The first set of rules was the rules we play today, where we buy properties, enhance their value by putting buildings on them, driving up the rents, and try to drive out all of our opponents. And it sort of established that if you have an unfettered system, the money will go to one place. And she had a second set of rules, a second game within the game. And in this game, the rent did not go to the other person. It went to the public treasury. And then it was used to enhance the public good, to pay for utilities and transportation and education, to make society better. She was trying to demonstrate the usefulness and the need for the single tax by showing what happens when you didn't have it and what happens when you do. Lizzie was an amazing person, but that part of her game never gets played. It has become largely unknown. And that is a very sad fact. Mr. Toastmaster.